Balls, the man, the myth, the legend. He's back. We've got an update on what Big Balls is up to as he defends women and, of course, the American dream. And just amazing, just what this guy has done. We'll get to that and what it's going to take to clean up Washington, D.C. We desperately need to do that. The president wants to do that. I've got all sorts of details on that. And also the great Miranda Devine is joining me today from the New York Post. She's got a great new podcast. It's called Pod Force One. Pod Force One. We'll talk to Miranda Devine. She's wonderful, and we'll get all the updates from her on what she's hearing about the effort to take down the bad guys behind Russiagate. Perhaps Big Balls should be involved in that effort. We'll get into all of it. Hey, before we do, got to thank the great sponsors of this program. You know, could the continued divide between Trump and the Federal Reserve put us behind the curve? Can the Fed take the right action at the right time? Or are we going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? And what could this mean for your savings? Consider diversifying with gold through Birch Gold Group. For decades, gold has been viewed as a safe haven in times of economic stagnation, global uncertainty, and high inflation. And Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings into gold. If you have an IRA or an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or just buy some to keep in your safe. First, get educated. Birch Gold is going to send you a free information kit on gold. All you have to do is text my name, Vince, to the number 989898. Again, text Vince to 989898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. That way, if the Fed can't stay ahead of the curve for the country, at least you can stay ahead for yourself. Data and message rates apply. Well, it appears Big Balls has definitely done it again, and it's unfortunate the circumstance that he had to find himself in, but he rose to the occasion. There's a headline on the local Fox affiliate this morning: Big Balls beaten in D.C., Trump warns district after Edward Korestein attacked. You will remember Edward Korestein is the young man who served on Doge. He was the genius who was hired by Elon Musk and Doge to work to make the government more efficient. And that team, to its great credit, went a long way in making our government much more efficient than it had been. They went in, they changed all of the payment systems. They made sure people were actually documenting what they were spending money on. They found all sorts of important things to cut. They presented them to the White House. The White House promptly moved on cutting them. And then some of these cuts have already been codified in the form of the rescissions that the president just got done with the United States Congress. $9 billion in spending for NPR, PBS, USAID, all cut. And you can thank Edward Big Balls Korestein for his role in all of it. Now, when we found out that there was a guy whose nickname was Big Balls, we laughed, those of us who love our country, and thought, that's hilarious. Glad he's on our side. The media went apoplectic. They were upset. They hated him. They think he's disgusting and tasteless, and how dare you, and who is this child, and why does he call himself Big Balls? So it was great. It was great in all of the ways that bring me joy. And now we find out that this past weekend, poor Big Balls had to rise to the occasion and fight back against a band of marauding idiots who thought that they could carjack him and his girlfriend. Here's what we've learned. 2 teen boys have been arrested following an attempted carjacking and assault of Big Balls, you know, the guy from the Department of Government Efficiency, reigniting former President Trump's push for federal control of the nation's capital. I'll get into that in a moment. Edward Korestein, who of course is known by the nickname Big Balls, was one of the most prominent figures in former President Trump's Doge. Well, of course he was the most prominent. He had the biggest balls. He's very prominent. A group charged with cutting federal bureaucracy. Korestein was assaulted around 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday in Logan Circle. For those of you who are not from D.C. or not familiar with the streets of D.C., this is Northwest D.C. Logan Circle, not the kind of place traditionally you would expect to be mugged, to be carjacked, to be assaulted. It can happen. But the frequency with which that is happening in all parts of the city has only grown as the left continues to run the nation's capital into the ground. It's totally disgraceful. And Big Balls, was at the front lines this weekend. 3 o'clock in the morning Sunday, a group of teens, Fox 5 says, attempted to carjack him and a woman described by police as his significant other. It's his lady. That's the lucky woman who ended up with big balls. D.C. police said a group of teens approached the couple and then made a comment about taking it. Of course they did. They declared they wanted to take the car. And they were confronted after Big Balls pushed the woman into the vehicle for safety. Get behind me, honey. He pushes her into the vehicle. And then the teens began the attack. They attacked Big Balls. And that's when officers nearby drove in. They said a police cruiser kind of pulled in around that time. And they were able to jump out. And they came rushing in to aid Big Balls with the fight that he was undertaking all by himself. The group fled at that moment. If you guys can pull up the shot that I have on screen right now, this is Big Balls. This is him, a photo taken by a friend of his who was apparently nearby. I don't know why the friend didn't dive into the action exactly, but I think the photo was taken it looks like some time after. And there's Big Balls covered in blood. I'm going to assume for the sake of making this story more awesome that that's the blood of everyone he fought off. But chances are it was actually his own. But he's covered in blood, the poor guy. And it's, as the president said this week, completely out of control. Completely out of control. The president of the United States is saying that it is well past time to take back Washington, D.C. Here's what he said on Truth Social last night. Crime in Washington, D.C. is totally out of control. Local youths, he says, he puts in quotation marks, and gang members, some only 14, 15, and 16 years old, are randomly attacking, mugging, maiming, and shooting innocent citizens, at the same time knowing that they will be almost immediately arrested. Almost immediately released, says the president. They're not afraid of law enforcement because they know nothing ever happens to them. But it's going to happen now. The law in D.C. must be changed to prosecute these, quote, minors as adults and lock them up for a long time, starting at age 14, says the president. The most recent victim was beaten mercilessly by local thugs. Washington, D.C. must be safe, clean, and beautiful for all Americans, and importantly for the world to see. That's a deeply important point. If D.C. doesn't get its act together and quickly, we're going to have no choice but to take federal control of the city and run this city how it should be run and put criminals on notice. They're not going to get away with it anymore. Perhaps it should have been done a long time ago. Then this incredible young man and so many others would not have had to go through the horrors of violent crime. If this continues, I am going to exert my powers and federalize this city. Make America great again. Make America great again. So that's the president's position on all of this, that this is out of control. Now, I want to dwell on a couple of the items here. You saw him point out, in quotation marks, multiple occasions, youths and minors. I think that's the president saying a couple different things. One is that he doesn't care what your age is. If you're committing violent crimes, you should be treated like a violent criminal. That's the way to stop violent crime. So stop excusing teenagers from committing horrific and sometimes homicidal carjackings in the nation's capital, because if you would like to get more of those, you will. In fact, in D.C., the big problem in D.C. with the carjackings for years now has been that teenagers have been committing these carjackings without any consequence whatsoever, to the point that they film themselves doing it. They'll record themselves committing a carjacking and then share it to social media in order to show off to their friends. That's how few consequences have been taking place in the nation's capital. And there's a very important distinction here that people may not realize about D.C., the way the law is handled. In Washington, D.C., it's a very unique circumstance because it is not a state, thank God. The founders intended it that way. It is not a state. It is run by the federal government, or at least it's supposed to be. The person who prosecutes adult crime in Washington, D.C., when the handcuffs are placed on a bad guy, is the U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C. That's not the same way all across the country. Normally, U.S. attorneys only get involved when federal crimes are broken. But if you committed a crime as an adult in D.C., it's the U.S. attorney who's going to prosecute you. Now, when Democrats controlled the U.S. attorney's office in D.C., There was a guy named Matthew Graves in that job. They didn't prosecute crime. Not actual crime, anyway. Matthew Graves, at one point, was declining 70% of all arrests for prosecution. 70%. That means 70% of the time when D.C. cops were putting handcuffs on people, Matthew Graves refused to prosecute them. Vince, how did crime get so bad? I don't know. We don't have a prosecutor. It's a free-for-all. You can do anything you want, and you won't be held accountable for it. The exception to that was Matthew Graves only went after, usually, January 6 people. Matthew Graves was the U.S. attorney who was prosecuting Trump supporters relentlessly for the duration of the Biden presidency. Matthew Graves is a bad man, and Matthew Graves was the U.S. attorney for D.C. But again, the U.S. attorney handles the adult crime. Now, who handles the juvenile crime? Who handles the teenagers? Well, that's the attorney general of the city. Yeah. And right now, that's a guy called Brian Schwab. He's the attorney general of Washington, D.C. Now, that guy, he's not very good. Last year, after yet another homicidal carjacking, take a look at cut 2 here. This is what the attorney general of Washington, D.C. had to say about how we stop all these carjackings. Take a look.
The discussion, residents did not hold back, voicing their frustrations.
I blame the system.
Many questioning why kids aren't being held accountable.
We as a city and a community need to be much more focused on prevention and surrounding young people and their families with resources if we want to be safer in the long run. We cannot prosecute and arrest our way out of it.
We cannot prosecute and arrest our way out of it. Sorry, what is his job again? Last I checked, he's a prosecutor. His job is to prosecute the bad guy. We can't prosecute our way out of crime. Then what the hell are you doing in that job? Why are you there? And so under the control of Democrats, D.C. continues to not only be a hellhole, but descend even into more of a hellhole. It's awful. And now Big Balls had to jump into action, had to swing into action, I should say, and stop a mob of teenagers, some of them at least were teenagers, who were attacking. Now, D.C. police are emphasizing that they've made 2 arrests in this case. And based on everything we've seen, these 2 arrests were just arrests that were made at the scene. In other words, of about a dozen people who began the attack on Big Balls, only 2 of them were taken into custody. Where are the rest of them? Why haven't we been given descriptions of the perpetrators who are still at large? And the answer to that seems to me very clear. When you don't get a description of the perpetrator, when you don't get any information from the police, it almost uniformly means that the suspect is black. And that would stand to reason in Washington, D.C. A lot of the carjackings in D.C. have been committed by black teenagers. That's just true. But why wouldn't the D.C. Police Department just say it out loud? Just declare it. Just tell people. If you're describing a suspect who's at large, you should describe the suspect who's at large. And yet they don't, because we live in this stupid world where you think declining to give people information is the proper course of action. How does that make our city safer? How does that make our nation's capital safer? It's insanity. And it's the nation's capital. So here you heard from the president in his Truth Social post. We also heard from the president yesterday in an event at the White House describing what happened to Big Balls and saying just how bad this is, and maybe it's time to take over D.C. again for the federal government. Take a look, cut 1. Here's the president.
By the way, I have to say that somebody from Doge was very badly hurt last night. You saw that. A young man who was beat up by a bunch of thugs in D.C. And either they're going to straighten their act out in the terms of government and in terms of protection, or we're going to have to federalize and run it the way it's supposed to be run.
Or we're going to have to federalize it and run it the way it's supposed to be run. So let's talk about that component of this. Washington, D.C. is already a federal city. Washington, D.C. is a federal city. The way things always worked in Washington, D.C. was that Congress did its job and ran the nation's capital. In fact, that's part of Congress's job to actually do that, to make decisions about what kind of money you're spending and how the district is run and It's a federal capital for a reason. The founders designed it that way. But in 1973, Congress passed into law something called D.C. Home Rule. That's where they created the office of the mayor and the city council. And Congress abdicated responsibility for running the day-to-day affairs of the Capitol. They said, we don't want to do it anymore. We don't want to be held accountable for it. We don't want to be a part of it. So they created local governance over Washington, D.C. And so in D.C., there are periodic elections, and in those elections always net the Democrats always run the show. And when they run the show, they run, just like other Democrats all across the country, the city directly into the ground. Think about the beautiful locations in Washington, D.C., the beautiful architecture, the amazing things that people from all over the world, and certainly all across our country, should be able to visit. Places like Union Station, just steps away from the United States Capitol building. Union Station is one of the prettiest buildings we have in the United States. It's a wonderful place to go visit, or at least it used to be. But these days, if you go to Union Station, what do you see? You see homelessness. You see fentanyl overdoses. You see beggars. You see, hell, when I was, a couple months ago, it was March of this year, we went to take some photos there. I asked a friend if he could take some pictures because we were doing things to help launch this show and the radio show. And I said, let's go take some photos. I was like, a great spot, of course, Union Station. So we did. We took some photos at Union Station. And my 11-year-old is standing with me. And she's holding, various, different pieces of clothing that I'm going to try and change into so we can get a bunch of photos all at once. And as she's standing there, some mentally ill person comes up, not to her, but comes up nearby and starts cursing at a wall. She's just screaming at a wall at full volume in the most disgusting curse words you can imagine. And I pulled my kid away. I said, why don't you come over here? So we got her out of the way. What's the point? I'm going to talk reason into the guy who's yelling at a wall? It's insanity. And why should families who are visiting their nation's capital be subjected to that? You can see people on a daily basis step over people who are OD'd on fentanyl at Union Station. It's crazy. And it shouldn't happen anymore. And the president here is suggesting that it may be time for Congress to reassert authority over the Capitol. Let me dial that up a little bit further. It is way past time for Congress to reassert authority over the Capitol. Way past time. I'd like to see the President of the United States tell Congress, do it now. Go all in. Now, Congress has a lot of things that has to get done for President Trump. It's not a secret that they're dragging their ass on a bunch of other stuff. Getting nominees through, for instance. Refusing to go into a real recess to allow the president to do a recess appointment. Passing appropriations bills, spending bills on time as they're supposed to, which they haven't done in forever. All of those things need to be done, clearly. And so the president probably doesn't want to add another mandatory thing to their plate just yet. But one way or another, this is not something that might have to happen. This is something that definitely has to happen. Mike Lee is a U.S. Senator, and I find myself sharing a lot of what Mike Lee has to say because I find myself agreeing with a lot of what Mike Lee has to say. Mike Lee reacted to all of this, the assault on big balls and the chaos in D.C., by saying this: the Constitution already federalizes D.C. Already. We just need Congress to do its job and reassert its lawmaking power over our nation's capital city. My bill, he says, the Bowser Act, by the way, that's a cheeky acronym because the mayor of Washington, D.C. is Muriel Bowser, and the acronym is something about taking control of D.C. again and getting rid of Muriel Bowser. My bill would do that, said Mike Lee. Please share if you agree that it's time to fix this. Yeah, it's time. It's long past time. I am not interested in seeing big balls get assaulted anymore. I'd like for that not to happen. I'd like, people to be able to be safe in Washington, D.C. That's my preference here. I just want to say I want to finish at least on this topic on this. I'm grateful for this guy Ed Korestein. He was kind of like the Daniel Penny yesterday or this weekend of Washington, D.C. He stood up for what is right, and I'm sure the left is already attacking him for this or will attack him or will try and make a mockery of him here. I'm not making a mockery of him at all. I think what he's done is great. He swung into action. When duty called, he went balls out to save the day. In fact, Ed Korstein leads the nation in sacks. And the truth is, we need more like him. So thank you, Ed Korstein. I'm going to raise a drink to you, sir. Appreciate you. And I'm grateful that you had the balls to do what was right. Big balls. Yeah. Big balls. Big balls. You got that, Justin? Was that just a little stinger, or are we going to play a whole thing? A little tiny taste. Big balls. Yeah, big balls. All right, thanks, big balls. Appreciate you. Yeah, the chat says moose balls. Yeah, we probably would have gone with moose balls, but big balls already, it's in the national consciousness. So who am I to decide these things? Yeah, big balls. Thank you. Hey, those myths that we hear, like cold weather gives you a cold, or we only use 10% of our brains? Here's another one. Thread count. A lot of people believe that higher thread count means something, like better sheets, but it's really just a measure of fabric density. When it comes to sheets, the thread quality actually matters more than the count. And that's where Boll and Branch comes in. I've been sleeping so much better on my new sheets. They use the highest quality organic cotton, makes them soft and durable. Plus, they're even softer with every wash. It's more than the number of threads. It's about comfort and long-lasting quality. So if you are looking for sheets that combine luxury and durability, Boll and Branch is the way to go. Your sleep will thank you. Feel the difference that an extraordinary night's sleep can make with Boll and Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/Vince. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/Vince to save 15% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions apply. Visit bollandbranch.com for details. Okay. Something fun happened yesterday. Somebody goes, Vince, where do you find room in your house for all these products? The answer is, I think a lot of the products are actually my bed or on my bed. So it's all consolidated, is the truth. And I love a great night's sleep. So I love those products. They're wonderful. Here's a topic that's catching my attention big time, and perhaps yours as well. How is the MAGA movement going to continue after Trump? When President Trump is done, and he just did a big interview with CNBC yesterday, and they asked him yet again, are you going to try and run for president again? Because they're trying to bait him into this thing like, how dare you? Who do you think you are? You're not allowed to do that. It's unconstitutional. And the whole thing is so stupid. Why does the media are so desperate to scandalize Trump that they have to try to invent things to attack him? Because his actual record is great. It's great. Anyway, so what's going to happen after Trump? What's going to happen after Trump? Who is going to be the Republican nominee? Who's going to be the guy that we're going to have to place some trust in to help carry this legacy forward, to right this ship, which desperately needs righting? This is not a 4-year fix. It's not an 8-year fix. It's going to take some time. And so we'll need somebody else to help carry the banner. Big balls! I hadn't contemplated that. But Big Balls would potentially be the guy. I'd like to hear more from Big Balls. I know that he's good at making government more efficient. I do. I know that he can defend his lady. I know that. I don't know how he'll handle running the entire country, but maybe he could be good. Big Balls did not come up yesterday as the president was asked about this. He had two other names in mind. One in particular, Peter Doocy asked President Trump, is J.D. Vance destined to become the next Republican nominee? Take a look.
You said this morning that you probably won't be running for a third term. This weekend, Secretary of State Rubio said that he thought J.D. Vance would be a great nominee. You could clear the entire Republican field right now. Do you agree that the heir apparent to MAGA is J.D. Vance?
Well, I think most likely, in all fairness, he's the vice president. I think Marco is also somebody that maybe would get together with J.D. in some form. I also think we have incredible people, some of the people on the stage right here. So it's too early, obviously, to talk about it, but certainly he's doing a great job, and he would be probably favored at this point.
Probably favored at this point. That's the furthest the president's gone on that subject. Obviously, we're early still. We haven't gotten to the midterms yet. We've got some time on the clock before we get there. But trust me, the guys who are contemplating a run, they're already contemplating the run. They're clearly thinking about it now. They're planning that far ahead. J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are both impressive in their own rights. I like both men. Rubio, of course, maybe like you, had my doubts about for some time. Rubio at one point was a part of the Gang of Eight amnesty bill alongside Lindsey Graham. Now, it feels like yesterday, but it was apparently many years ago. Rubio has gone through something of a political transformation since that time. I should say maybe an ideological transformation since that time. I've liked a lot of what I've heard out of Marco Rubio over these past few years. The guy seems to be much more clearly interested in the issues that are affecting the United States directly, the issues that are affecting the American people, the economic well-being of our country, the borders we need in order to have our sovereignty. He's on the right track for sure. And he's made, I think, a very competent and impressive Secretary of State. He has the diplomatic skills, no question, to do that job. And then there's J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, who comes up as a famous author, at least in the public consciousness. He came up in kind of a hardscrabble background, becomes a United States Marine, goes to Ivy League schools, writes a national bestseller. That bestseller becomes very popular, becomes a Hollywood movie, Hillbilly Elegy, and then arrives in the Senate in Ohio. And then the president becomes convinced that he'd be the right guy to be the vice president of the United States. And sure enough, President Trump and Vice President Vance win the big ticket together last year. J.D. Vance has been a loyal and deeply competent and capable vice president. Just compare the media skills of the guys, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. Rubio's gotten a lot better. He's definitely learned from President Trump. J.D. Vance has accelerated at light speed when it comes to the way he handles the press. You sit him down for an interview with a friendly person, sit him down with an adversarial person, and he'll shine. He's able to do the podcasts at every level, whether it's kind of the sort of the general audience podcasts or the specific political podcasts, the comedy podcasts. He's able to go on ABC and NBC and square away the dopes who are trying to corner him but are too stupid to even land a punch. He's had a lot of success, and J.D. Vance could be very, very big as the Republican nominee. And one of the things I like about this moment is right now, it kind of seems like everyone involved is being pretty gracious to one another. Here's Marco Rubio this past weekend with Laura Trump, about a couple days ago, with Laura Trump on her show, saying not only does he think J.D. Vance would be a great nominee, he kind of hopes he is the guy. Take a look, cut 4.
Do you have your sights set outside of the State Department? Well,
I think J.D. Vance would be a great nominee, and if I think if he decides he wants to do that, and so I think he's doing a great job as vice president. He's a close friend, and I hope he intends to do it. I know it's kind of early, but being in the role that I'm in here at the Secretary of State, I really don't play in politics. There's actually rules against me being involved in domestic politics, and I want to do this job as long as the president allows me to do it, and stay in that job, which would keep me here all the way through, January of 2028.
I hope he intends to do it. Not a small statement. I want to remind you that these guys, they are aware of every syllable that they utter and what it implies. I hope he intends to do it. Now, Rubio, of course, is not ruling out a presidential run there, and the two men may very well run. Occasionally, in presidential politics, I know it seems like this never happens, but you can get primary candidates running on the same stage who are not vicious to one another. They may very well run and try and make a positive case for why they would be the best guy without knocking the other guy down. And perhaps that's what we get with J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. But the upside to all of this is the bench here is deep. It's strong. And you have President Trump to thank for that. The Republican Party wouldn't look like this were it not for President Trump teaching the Republican Party what they should be focused on and how they should present it, how the fight should be conducted, and the lengths to which the left will go to stop you. We've learned a lot from Trump. Those guys have learned a lot from Trump. And I think that the future for the Republican Party, if those are the candidates, could be very, very bright. And the Democrats, who are being led by Jasmine Crockett right now, They're a disaster. They're a complete disaster. One more thing on J.D. Vance, and then I got to get to our great guest. Well, first of all, J.D. Vance has a huge favorability lead over Marco Rubio right now. J.D. Vance has a plus 26-point favorability advantage over Marco, according to the latest Gallup survey. Also, tonight, Wednesday night, at the Naval Observatory. The Naval Observatory, that's where J.D. Vance lives. The vice president of the United States has a house there. CNN claims, do I want to say reports? Let's go with claims. CNN claims that J.D. Vance is hosting an Epstein summit tonight at the Naval Observatory. And that will include members of the White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and FBI Director Kash Patel, as well as the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. He's the guy who just met with Ghislaine Maxwell. Apparently, the subject of conversation, in part, is going to be what they do with Ghislaine Maxwell's testimony to Todd Blanche. Are they going to release it in audio form or transcript form or whatever? But to remind you, if this is true, if CNN's reporting here is true, what this is once again, the Trump administration isn't burying the Epstein saga. They're looking for as many ways as they possibly can to release more information. They're not interested in making it go away. They're interested in delivering for the American people what we've been asking for. So that's good news. So despite whatever you hear in the press, they're looking for distractions from Epstein. Really? They're hosting a summit to discuss Epstein, apparently. If that's the case, I don't think they're looking for distractions. I think they're looking for disclosures. Pretty interesting. Okay, coming up, Miranda Devine will be with us in just a moment. Hey, do you ever just want to turn off the news and ignore politics? Yeah, I know that feeling. It's overwhelming, but here's the thing. We're citizens of a republic. The decisions made by our government do affect our everyday lives. In order to be a good citizen, you've got to read and understand the United States Constitution. And that's why I'm very excited that Hillsdale College is offering a brand new, free online course. I mean it, free. It's called The Federalist. The Federalist Papers were written primarily by two of America's most important founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. And together they explain how the United States Constitution established a government strong enough to secure the rights of citizens and safe enough to wield that power. Hillsdale's online course on the Federalist includes 10 lectures, each about 30 minutes long. You can take the course at your own pace. There's no cost to sign up. Plus, Hillsdale offers more than 40 other free online courses. It's great. And that Federalist course, I've been consuming it, and I love it. And, one of the points that they talk about very early is, we often think of the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, and the Federalists won and the Anti-Federalists lost. But that's not exactly the way history went down. In fact, were it not for the Anti-Federalists, we very well probably wouldn't have had the Bill of Rights. That was a big, important victory for the country that the Anti-Federalists were able to produce. You can find out about it all. Go to hillsdale.edu/Vince to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/Vince to enroll for free. hillsdale.edu/Vince. A lot of fun. Love Hillsdale. Thank you, Hillsdale. And thank you also to Jacked Up Fitness. More and more Americans are prioritizing their wellness and getting back in shape. But studies prove that strength training does a lot more to help burn fat than cardio alone. That's true, by the way. That is absolutely true. I've been working with Don and the team over at Jacked Up Fitness for a couple of months now. And let me tell you, these guys really know what they're doing. They have their all-in-one home gyms that are already best in class. Trust me, I have one. I love it. But now their all-new X Series takes home fitness to the next level. The Power Rack Extreme Functional Trainer lets you do hundreds of exercises, basically everything that you would do at the gym, right from your spare room or garage. Want more? The Power Rack Pro X features a fully upgraded cable crossover system with articulating pulley arms for unlimited width combos. That means you'll figure out a way to hit every single muscle group with this thing. If you're new to it, don't worry. They've got a free Get Jacked Up video program. Just press play and follow along. So no more excuses. Let's do it together. Go to getjackedup.com. Getjackedup.com. All you have to do is use the promo code Vince and you'll save 10%. That's getjackedup.com. Thank you to Jacked Up Fitness. I love my Jacked Up Fitness machine. It's like the greatest thing ever. Always nice to be able to get the workout done. Okay, let's now get to our great guest from the New York Post, Miranda Devine is here. She's got a great new podcast called Pod Force One for the New York Post. Miranda Devine. Miranda, great to have you with us on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Vince. Good to talk to you.
I want to get your reaction first and foremost to the Russiagate disclosures that we've been getting and the fact that a grand jury is now being impaneled to go after all of this. I think probably like me that you've been deeply annoyed. In fact, you wrote a column about this week, that we haven't seen consequences for years on this subject. But now all of a sudden, it does feel like this is action. Do you think this is real?
Look, I certainly hope so. And it does seem that there is more action than there was in President Trump's first term. And I interviewed him for my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said that, I asked him, are you angry? This was when the beginning of the revelations from Tulsi Gabbard and Chuck Grassley, the FBI and the CIA were coming out. And I said, are you angry now that you see in black and white what was done to you and, how your first term was sabotaged? And he said, yes, actually, because I'm human. And now he realizes that the mercy that he showed Hillary Clinton in his first term was misguided. He acknowledged that his audiences at his rallies were chanting, lock her up. There was certainly an appetite in MAGA world for, accountability, if not retribution. I think it's accountability and a deterrence rather than retribution we're seeing at the moment, because what happened after Donald Trump showed Hillary Clinton mercy and did not go after her for substantial allegations of substantial crimes that were already being investigated by parts of the FBI. He ended up not, tasking anyone with pursuing that. And his agencies decided, his Attorney General Bill Barr, etc., made their own decisions not to pursue her. And Donald Trump said he wanted the country to heal. But he was rewarded by his opponents doubling down. There was the Russiagate hoax. There was, that basically crippled his presidency, or at least the first 2 years of it. And then the ongoing lawfare during the Biden administration, these attempts to put him in jail, to bankrupt him, to assassinate him, everything to just prevent him from ever coming to power again.
Yes.
Thankfully, the American people saw through it, and he was delivered a comprehensive victory in every metric, including the popular vote back last November. But what he has realized is that now that this information is being uncovered by really determined appointees, people like Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe and Kash Patel.
Yes.
And of course, Chuck Grassley, who's always been a whistleblower and transparency champion. Donald Trump is, and all his appointees are absolutely determined to bring accountability to those wrongdoers, those coup plotters, and that will act, we hope, as a deterrent against this happening ever again to any other president.
President Trump is not the only person in that group you just mentioned who was targeted by the deep state cabal. Kash Patel was, quite infamously. Tulsi Gabbard was, quite infamously.
Yes.
You just had an interview with her, actually, about that. To what extent do you think, having lived through that experience, has made them more dogged fighters on President Trump and the country's behalf?
Well, I mean, they understand at a visceral level what it means, what the toll that it takes to be targeted, to have your, all your bank accounts, to have your iCloud surveilled, to be, as in Tulsi Gabbard's case, placed on the Quiet Skies surveillance program by the TSA, where every time she went to an airport, she had a team of, agents watching her every move, searching her luggage, patting her down, spending hours searching through every nook and cranny of her luggage, even the lining of her suitcases, unrolling, unwrapping every item, including they did the same thing to her husband. That's just one example. I mean, Rudy Giuliani, he had his cloud surveilled. You saw, and then of course he was raided by the FBI and had all his devices taken away, and for nothing. I mean, in the end, they didn't even press a single charge, but the process is the punishment. And then all the January 6 defendants, they had SWAT teams raiding their homes, even if they were, if guilty of anything, were guilty of misdemeanor trespass. What about, right to life people, anti-abortion activists, peaceful people who were arrested for praying outside an abortion clinic, or Catholics who went to traditional mass, or parents who spoke up at school meetings against the gender madness that was engulfing their children's schools. Anybody on the conservative side who dissented from this radical left ideology that Joe Biden ushered in and that Obama instigated, found themselves to be the target of the federal government and the very powerful national security and law enforcement apparatus that the federal government has at its disposal.
One of the features of the Russiagate disclosures that we're seeing now is that we didn't get these in term one. We found out a lot during President Trump's first term. But we didn't find out some of the most important stuff. And in fact, members of Congress even are saying, where was this when we were investigating it? We didn't see the Durham Annex. We weren't able to see the intelligence that established that Hillary Clinton was clearly cooking up a fake hoax in order to distract from her emails. Why is it that this is only coming out now? And what kind of challenge, you just talked to Tulsi Gabbard, what kind of challenge is she facing in getting this information out?
Look, firstly, I think that in President Trump's first term, he had his own appointees who slightly mistrusted him, who wondered if the whole Russiagate lies were true, and who therefore believed that his election was not legitimate. That was the aim of Russiagate. That was why Obama directed John Brennan and James Clapper and Jim Comey and so on to concoct this fake intelligence assessment saying that Vladimir Putin had intervened in the 2016 election so that Donald Trump would win. This was untrue. The intelligence said the opposite, if anything. Or Russia just wanted to intervene or make mischief, in fact, to just sow chaos in the American political system. Well, I mean, the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they sowed enough chaos to last a lifetime. And I think what now you have these people like Tulsi Gabbard and so on, who are much more focused on the reality, which was that this was a coup, as she calls it, a years-long coup against Donald Trump. And she's still finding opposition. I mean, even with Christopher Wray at the FBI was always obstructive, but he's been replaced by Kash Patel. And yet there is still a deep state at the CIA, even though John Ratcliffe's there, at the FBI, that is hobbling her attempts to extract documents. They either, say they don't have them, they slow walk, or they produce them with so many redactions they're meaningless. And I think Chuck Grassley is finding the same thing. So for all the goodwill in the world from the top of these organizations, they're so vast and the deep state has such a sort of a claw on them that it's proved difficult for Tulsi Gabbard. But luckily, because like all of President Trump's appointees, she is dogged and determined and tough. Yes. Remember, she cut her teeth in politics in the Democratic machine. She was deputy, the vice president of the DNC. So she knows their dirty ways. She knows how to confront them and what needs to be done to vanquish them. And she's laser focused on that.
I was thinking of Tulsi when she was revealing that the Russians had detected that Hillary Clinton had psycho-emotional problems. She was standing up there at the lectern saying, yeah, the Russians knew that she had psycho-emotional problems. They were dosing her with tranquilizers every day on the campaign trail. And this is all information, of course. The reason why this is important is that this idea that the Russians were trying to help Trump get elected, if they were, that's the kind of information they would have made public, but didn't. Instead, in fact, they held it back. But I couldn't help but think, as Tulsi was saying, that she must have delivered it with at least some joy, that she could smack Hillary Clinton around in public after all of the vile things Hillary said about Tulsi through the years.
Oh, yeah. And the vile things that Hillary's allies did to Tulsi. Absolutely. And, I mean, she's very professional and she just delivers this delicious information straight. But you can almost detect a little kind of joy or eagerness when she, repeats those lines from the intercepted Russian communications intercepted by the Dutch, which and it was intercepted Russian communications, but the Russians had intercepted DNC communications with the Hillary Clinton campaign. And this information was found in the annex, the classified, newly declassified annex, buried for, a couple of years in the John Durham investigation into Russiagate. Don't know why it was classified, don't know why it was hidden from the public. It's so damaging to Democrats because it really is one of the main smoking guns to show why they did what they did and how the Russians were, as you say, had all this information that they'd gleaned from these emails, including, as you say, that Hillary Clinton had these psycho-emotional problems, that she was prone to fits of rage and then uncontrollable laughter, hysterical laughter, and that she was on these heavy doses of tranquilizers. And I mean, sure, it's Russian and, you have to question the veracity of it, but it does accord with what we saw of Hillary Clinton on the campaign trail. And I don't know if you remember, but on the 9/11 anniversary, she was at Ground Zero in Manhattan, and she was sort of had some turn and pretty much collapsed and had to be bundled into her black van and taken out of there. So there were all sorts of weird behaviors of hers on the campaign trail, which I think made people, gave people pause. And look, it's another example, just like with Kamala Harris, of how incredibly irresponsible the Democratic Party is at putting up these very unsuitable people, including Joe Biden, who was obviously senile even before the 2020 election, or had cognitive problems anyway. And then the way that they tried to trick the American people, and it shows the great good sense of Americans that they rejected Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris at least. And unfortunately in 2020, I think there were so many dirty tricks under cover of COVID that Joe Biden did win.
If the consequences of their lies weren't so painful, I would just be laughing constantly at them. Like, really, Trump needed Russia to win the election? Or like, we needed Russia to tell us that Hillary Clinton was a psycho? Or we needed the media to tell us that Joe Biden was senile? It's just like, honestly, we live through the most cartoonish of times. It's unbelievable. But on the consequences side, Miranda, that's the thing that I know this audience is obsessed with. I'm obsessed with. You are. How much pressure do you think Pam Bondi feels to deliver here? How much is it bearing down on her that she has to bring us a scalp?
Look, I mean, I think she's just following through the process. She got criminal referrals from John Ratcliffe from the CIA and from Tulsi Gabbard. And she's reportedly is going to impanel a grand jury to look into some of these allegations.
Yep.
And, I'm hearing
perhaps in Florida.
There could be, perhaps in Florida, perhaps also in DC, perhaps also in New York. I mean, this is a vast conspiracy. I think, John Ratcliffe initially was talking about potential perjury charges for Brennan and Clapper because they lied about the inclusion of the Steele dossier into that intelligence community assessment John Ratcliffe has now released documents that show that John Brennan was insisting that the Steele dossier, totally discredited, be included in this assessment.
Yes.
Against the strong disapproval and objections of the top Russia experts at the CIA, who said it would discredit the whole document. No, he insisted that, and it didn't just appear in the annex, as the New York Times and so on say. It was actually embedded in the body of the report, the Steele dossier was. So that's the sort of thing that I think, John Ratcliffe was talking about, catching out Brennan, certainly on perjury. But now, they're looking at, I understand, a much broader category of alleged criminality, and that would be conspiracy, something under the Civil Rights Act. So let's see how it pans out. I think there are some very clever prosecutors in the Department of Justice who are looking at creative ways of bringing accountability and bringing justice to these wrongdoers who are so arrogant, so entitled, and have gotten away with blue murder for so long. I don't think they really are comprehending what's ahead of them, because, you saw Brennan and Clapper just penned that ridiculous New York Times op-ed full of lies the other day.
Yeah.
They're still emboldened. John Brennan's still going on MSNBC, CNN, and declaring his innocence and claiming that, the Russia hoax was real. Everything that they've ever done has been to pin blame on Russia, whether it be the Hunter Biden laptop, Donald Trump's election victory, even Hunter Biden, when he was caught out with the Ashley Madison hack, said it was Russians stole his information. And the tragedy of it is that Donald Trump planned to try to reset relations between the US and Russia in his first term, which was a good thing for global security, because the real adversary at that time for America was China. And so, he thought that this would be a good way of trying to establish normal relations. Also something that, that the Obama administration with Hillary Clinton tried and failed to do. And so, that didn't happen. In fact, Donald Trump, I'm sure, felt compelled to show toughness against Russia to prove that he wasn't a Putin puppet. And relations have just gone downhill ever since, I think by design. And thus you have the tragedy unfolding in the Ukraine war. And imagine how different things might have been if Russia felt constrained by, its newfound respect in the Western world. As it happens, it's a pariah, and it doesn't matter they don't care about what people think of them. They're just going to steal and take whatever they want. No ability to constrain them.
And President Trump is still working on a peace. Even today, as we speak, Steve Witkoff has just met with Vladimir Putin. So they're trying to figure out a way to get all that done. And
for
to
the
your
umpteenth time.
Yeah. And to your point about who should be arrested here, I mean, look, if they can arrest, if the left can arrest and prosecute Douglas Mackey for making an anti-Hillary Clinton meme in the 2016 election, then the rest of us can arrest for good reason John Brennan, for leading a treasonous conspiracy against the United States. I just think that's fair. Miranda Devine, thank you. Great to see you as always.
Thanks,
congratulations on the
too.
Great new podcast.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Miranda Devine from great podcast, Podforce One. She's got a new interview with Tulsi Gabbard out. Speaking of Tulsi, if you're wondering about, how serious is the Justice Department about all of this? Are they really going after people? Are they really going to prosecute people? Is that grand jury really going to amount to something? Well, we got a little bit more evidence last night that things are headed in the right direction. Here's Tulsi Gabbard appearing on the Fox News channel, Cut 5, saying the United States Department of Justice is now requesting even more documents from the Director of National Intelligence to take down this entire Obama cabal. Look.
There's a report tonight from the Federalist that the DOJ is actually asking you for more documents in its grand jury probe. Is that true? And what are they asking for now?
That is true, Laura, and I just want to point out how important this is, that Attorney General Pam Bondi, through the Department of Justice, is taking this necessary first step toward accountability, which is essential for the American people to begin to have any kind of trust in the integrity of our democratic republic. I met with the Department of Justice prosecutors today, and yes, they are committed to leaving no stone unturned as they conduct this grand jury investigation and find the truth.
That information, by the way, as you may have heard Laura Ingraham say there, comes to us from our friend Sean Davis, who was just on this program a couple days ago. Sean has been must-read throughout all of this. And he got the scoop last night that the DOJ has requested documents from the Director of National Intelligence following the criminal referral on all of this Russiagate stuff. Sean says the DOJ sent the DNI, that is Tulsi Gabbard, a request for a treasure trove of documents related to the ongoing investigation into Obama, the Federalist has learned. According to a letter from a senior advisor who works for Tulsi, Paul McNamara, the DOJ has requested a wide array of documents about the Obama administration's 2016 and 2017 attempts to frame then-President Trump as an agent of Russia who stole the 2016 election from Hillary. You understand what that means? If we're going back 9 years, if the United States Department of Justice is going back 9 years for documents, that means they're building a conspiracy case. The statute of limitations has run on so many of these things where you can't directly go after the singular crime as a standalone issue. But if it's a part of a broader ongoing criminal conspiracy, that opens up the entire lens. And now you have the United States Department of Justice going, hey, Tulsi, DNI Gabbard, please send us more dating back to 2016, dating back to 2017, because the case that they're building to present to the grand jury is going to require crimes that took place in those years. That's a big deal. And I'm very, very glad to see it. I think that's just wonderful. One more piece of good news before we check out today. You remember Alligator Alcatraz, of course, down in Florida. We get an additional announcement from the Department of Homeland Security and the state of Indiana. The state of Indiana yesterday. Get ready for Speedway Slammer. The Speedway Slammer is coming to the state of Indiana. DHS has confirmed to Fox that the new one that they're going to open is going to be at the Miami Correctional Facility in Indiana. This is Miami, Indiana, to be clear, not another Florida location, although we'll take as many as we can get here. It's going to be called the Speedway Slammer. DHS says it's going to expand ICE detention capacity by 1,000 beds. And it will feature, yet again, some of the worst criminal aliens. And they're doing this in partnership with the governor, Mike Braun. You got a statement from both Secretary Noem, who's very excited. She thanks Governor Braun for his assistance in all of this. She says, if you are in America illegally, you could find yourself in Indiana's Speedway Slammer. So avoid arrest. Self-deport now. Use the CBP Home app to deport out of the country. Indiana Governor Mike Braun saying as well, we're proud to work with President Trump and Secretary Noem as they remove the worst of the worst. And, of course, he goes on to talk about that we're collaborating. And here's a picture of it. It's the Miami Correctional Facility. We've got the Speedway Slammer. Here's the thing, guys. Now that we have Alligator Alcatraz and the Speedway Slammer, what are we going to get next? Send me your ideas. Maybe we can feature them tomorrow. I want some good ideas for other locations. They should probably be alliterative, you know. Where should we go? Where should we send these people? We should obviously send them home, but on the way, what kind of rest stop are we going to build for them? That's the question. My thanks, as always, for you joining me today on this edition of Vince. My thanks again to Big Balls. Can we send out the show for Big Balls? At the conclusion of this program, if you're watching live on Rumble, you will be sent over to Steven Crowder. He's doing his thing today. But I appreciate you, as always, here on Vince. Let's take it away. A celebration of Big Balls.
Late at night, when the streets go cold, evil creeps in, getting way too bold. But there's a man